Welcome back to another episode of the Taiwanology podcast. This is your host, Kwangyin from Taiwan's CommonWealth magazine. What is the most important country in the world to watch right now? And yet one of the most opaque and difficult to understand. If I say China, I believe Phil would disagree. But tracking China has become increasingly challenging. The Great Firewall and tighter controls over information have not been helpful. In recent years, many researchers from Western countries and from Taiwan have been unable to even travel to China to do fieldwork. Even for journalists like me and my colleagues, first-hand reporting has become far more difficult compared with 10 years ago. Yet, we cannot afford to look away. In 2025, China reported its highest ever trade surplus. At first glance, that suggests an economy powering ahead on exports. But in fact, the story is far more complicated than that. The numbers seem to point to a more complicated reality. Today, I'm very happy to have an expert in this field in the studio with us. We are joined today by Tao Yifen, Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at National Taiwan University, and a senior advisor at the office of former President Tsai Ing-wen. She will walk us through the latest China monitoring report published by the Thinking Taiwan Foundation, its key findings, and why it is especially important for Taiwan to maintain a systematic and clear-eyed watch on China right now. Welcome to the studio, Ms. Tao.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I actually heard a lot of good things about Ms. Tao when I was still in university. So I have many classmates who also took your class. So it's my pleasure to have you here today. Right. So as I mentioned in the introduction, so China is really, I think, on a lot of people's minds, including the global trends watchers, and so people across the strait and across the Atlantic even. Which intrigued me is the Thinking Taiwan Foundation. So first of all, could you tell us something about this foundation?
The Thinking Taiwan Foundation has already existed before President Tsai Ing-wen became president in 2016.
So over 10 years ago.
Yeah, and it was a public forum for people to have a dialogue or exchange views about important issues to Taiwan's future. And after Tsai stepped down in 2024, she was considering what kind of role she could play as a retired national leader. And she thought the proper role for her now is kind of a step back from the day-to-day policy making and maybe help watching the long-term trend, which is important for Taiwan. So she decided to start the Thinking Taiwan 2.0.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so
that's it.
rebrand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and as you can see on the website, the Thinking Taiwan Foundation, they concern three issues. One is a policy review. Second is a geopolitical economy. And the third is society and humanity. And our China Monetary Project belongs to the geopolitical economy.
I see. Right. So it looks like Thinking Taiwan Foundation is a window into policy making and ideas concerning Taiwan's progress and Taiwan's development.
Yeah, and the foundation's website also have an English version. So we are not only focusing on the domestic audience, we also would like to have a dialogue with international communities. Yeah, we really hope the Taiwan's insight can be seen in the international communities.
Right.
Yeah, so it's it's a platform for research, dialogue, and international communication rather than a kind of a political advocacy organization.
I see.
Yeah, pushing for only single agenda. Yeah.
I see. I think that's very important. This openness is something that we really need right now, I think. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, right. And what does former President Tsai plan to achieve with Thinking Taiwan Foundation?
Well, I think because she always liked to think about 想想. So
Mm-hmm.
I think she is still think about what she would like to achieve. But for the time being, I think she just want to create a platform for people to have dialogue on important issues for Taiwan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a work in progress, I think, on many levels. Right. So let us talk about this China monitoring report. I actually have a hard copy in front of me. There are many pages. And so this report, this is the first year you're making
Mm-hmm.
this report. And as I understand, it's going to be an annual project. So this is year one. It tracks 50 indicators. So as I can see right now, we have 50 indicators under 5 categories, including economy, finance, fiscal policy, society, and politics. And these indicators, well, I will not go over the 50 indicators, but the ones that caught my eye is red supply chain, how they are sweeping across the globe. Also, unemployment rate, income gaps, and also the public confidence in economic prospects. So, could you tell us who are involved in this project and why did you choose this approach of doing 50 indicators?
Well, I think just as you say in the beginning of this program, nowadays it's very difficult to observe China because it has become so intransparent. So we organize a research team, basically combine two kinds of scholars. One is China specialists who have abundant experiences of field work in China over many years. The other is economists who is able to observe one economy with standardized indicators. So that's our team. And over last 1 year, we have held more than 50 lectures in the foundation to invite experts on China to give us talk about many different aspects.
Mhm.
And then finally, we decided to build this indicator system across 5 areas, as you say, the economy, finance, fiscal policy, society, and the politics. They are all areas where stress can build quietly over time.
Mhm.
And the indicators don't give you drama. They give you direction.
Mhm.
Are things improving, deteriorating, and how fast? And another reason for indicator is continuity. This isn't a one-off report.
Right.
We want to watch how China change year by year using the same yardsticks.
Mhm.
Yeah, and in the future, I think we also hope to develop some topic-specific sets of indicators. For example, we would like to see whether China is on the track of developing into a wartime economy.
Mhm.
And we also want to know why hasn't China's rapid economic development brought political democratization as what happened in other East Asian rapidly growing economies. Yeah, so we will have different kind of sets of indicators to develop in the future.
Right. I think you have a lot of difficult work cut out
Well,
for you
probably too
guys.
ambitious.
But I guess we really have to aim high. So, with these 50 indicators, I think you pointed out a very important aspect. It's the continuity, and only by observing the long term trends can we really decipher the change that's happening. So, before we dive into the indicators themselves, Ms. Tao, I'm also curious about you. So you are a renowned scholar in China studies and political science. And how did you get here?
My journey in China studies started from early 1990s. That was last century when I was studying PhD at Columbia University. And I wrote my dissertation on Zhu Rongji's banking reform in the 1990s.
Who was Zhu Rongji for those who are not familiar?
Zhu Rongji was the prime minister, the premier of China in the 1990s. That was Jiang Zemin's time period. I think looking back, probably we could say that was the best time for China and for we China watcher,
Because it was a time of opening up?
Yeah, exactly. I think in the 1990s, China is kind of embracing the globalization during Jiang Zemin and Zhu Rongji's time period. So when I was doing my dissertation research in China, I think it's so easy because people are so open. They are so willing to talk about
You mean
the
Chinese
situation.
people?
Yeah, the Chinese people. Yeah, so that is the beginning. And then I come back. My first job is in Institute for International Relations in Zhengda, IIR. During the time, many young China specialists worked there. And I also took part in the funding process of many China study centers in National Tsinghua University and National Taiwan University, and then got back to teach at NTU. And in 2016, President Tsai invited me to join her national security team. I was very surprised because before that, I actually only met her 3 times. I didn't know why she invited me.
Why do you think she invited you?
Yeah, I have never asked her, but I guess probably although we only met 3 times, but for each of the meeting, probably only she and I are female in that meeting because national security field is just like a football court. It is so male dominated. Yeah, so I think probably that's why she got a strong impression.
So it was
for
a
me.
DEI nomination?
Probably. Yeah, you may say so. Yeah.
No, I think what you said really resonated with me. Early 1990s, I think that was also the time when CommonWealth magazine, my colleagues were able to travel to China and they were able to cover the stories of rapidly changing, evolving Chinese economy and society. So it was a time where hundreds of different flowers bloom by 花齐放, right?
Yeah.
So it was an era like that. That was, I mean, arguably, like you said, the best time for doing China study. So now, what's it like now to do China studies?
Nowadays, because I have been working for the DPP government, I could not go to China anymore. But not only me, a lot of my colleagues in Taiwan's China studies, they won't go to China now. Yeah.
They could not, or they choose not to.
They choose not to. They dare not. Yeah, and not only in Taiwan, but also scholars from Japan, from the United States, they won't go to China to do research. One reason is security, because they don't feel secure anymore when they are doing research there. The other is even they don't have a security problem. They probably cannot get that much because people are not willing to talk about what happened there. Yeah, so it's very difficult to do research in China now.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from the journalists who cover China, they're experiencing the same situation, even if they are based in China. Now it's increasingly for them, especially the Western journalists, to find people who are willing to talk to them because they are really afraid. So this is telling us the importance of continue to study China, and maybe by the way of studying the 50 indicators, we can get a more comprehensive image of China's economy. We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we will ask Ms. Tao, how good is the shape of China's economy? Welcome back to the Taiwanology podcast. We have in our studio today Ms. Tao Yifen. She is the Associate Professor of National Taiwan University's Department of Political Science. Today, she's here to talk about the China Monitoring Report, which is a report that was just published by the Thinking Taiwan Foundation. It's a foundation established by former President Tsai Ing-wen. So let's take a closer look at the report. And of course, we will not go over the 50 indicators. But one aspect I think the listeners will be very interested is China's economy. I remember when we met for coffee, you've described China's economy as operating at dual speed, like two speeds. Strong exports on the one hand, but weak domestic consumption on the other hand. Could you explain to us what are the indicators that support that conclusion and what this means?
Okay, it means two very different realities coexist at the same time. Externally, China looks strong. Exports are booming.
Mhm.
Last year, China ran a trade surplus of over 1.2 trillion US dollars, the largest in history. Exports accounted for about one-third of China's GDP growth. But internally, it is a completely different story. Consumption is weak. Prices are flat or falling.
Mhm.
People are saving instead of spending. Private investment has been shrinking. And some indicators in our report include persistent deflationary pressure, a widened M1 and 2 scissors gap.
Okay, so sorry, there are too many jargons here. So,
Yeah.
what's deflationary pressure?
Deflationary pressure, that means the price will not go up.
Prices going down.
The price going down.
Okay, okay.
Even if the government cut the interest rate, it will not stimulate people to spend.
Right.
And the demand go down, so the price go down. So it will become a deflationary
I see.
economy.
People don't want to spend. They want to save money, and
Mhm.
when they consume, they choose the cheaper options.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned M1, M2. What are those?
M1 and 2 is different economic indicators for money supply. And it have different meaning, a major different kind of money supply. So if M1, M2 scissor gap is wider, that means a lot of liquidity is trapped in savings. That is what happened now in China.
So that's what we're seeing. The gap between M1, M2 are widening.
Yeah,
That means people are saving instead of spending money.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, what do you think this tells us about China's economy?
I think now China is producing and exporting aggressively, but its household and private firms actually are very pessimistic about the future. And so they will not spend or to invest, but rather than save, deleverage. That's what happened now.
So, does that mean the China's economy is not as good as it seems?
I would say so, yeah.
And what does that mean for the world economy?
For the world economy, I think I would say now China is not in a cyclical slowdown, but it is a structural downturn. So I think for quite a long time, it probably will rely upon export for their economic growth, even for economic stability. So it means it will export a lot, but the whole world economy probably cannot afford that much of exports from China.
We could only buy so much clothes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So I think in the future, probably the trade friction would become increasingly serious.
Right. Because I think we have been seeing that, right, in the past few years. There is a surplus of cheap Chinese goods flooding the global markets,
Yeah.
including cheap clothes by Shein and
Mm-hmm.
cheap goods by Temu
Yeah.
and cheap EVs flooding European markets. So I think the friction we're seeing now is, for example, the EU's investigation into Chinese EV companies about unfair subsidies or unfair trade practices. I think we will continue to see that.
Yeah, I think not only in European countries, but also in some countries in global south where China really want to make friends with, like Brazil and Indonesia. They also have some anti-dumping regulation against China's exports.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, some might ask the question, what's wrong with cheaper goods? Isn't it a great thing that China is offering so many cheap products so we can save money? So what's wrong with that?
Well, it may be a good thing for consumers, but it's not a good thing for the local employers and the industries. Yeah, we have seen so many countries in the world, they are experiencing so-called de-industrialization because we see cheap exports from China floating around the world. So industry after industry, they just cannot sustain. Yeah, they cannot tolerate this kind of cheap price. So they just
They closed down.
went out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the Rust Belt in the US.
Indeed.
And yeah, I think a lot of companies in Taiwan also are suffering.
Yeah, China just produced too much and consumed too little. I think one figure is that China produced about 33% of the world production and only consumes 13% of the world consumption.
And they have so many people.
Yeah.
Right. So that's economy. Right. And this report, I'm very happy to see it also tracks social indicators. And one indicator that caught my eye is the number of incidents of social unrest. What do you see from this data?
In our social indicators, it shows that a steady rise in social protests since the pandemic, even under a tightened government surveillance. Look at the marriage and birth rate in our report. They are at historical low. So I think it's a kind of a vote of no confidence. You can see it as a more profound silent protest happening. What is most striking is the nature of the social protest. Compared to the Hu Jintao time period, today's protests are less about isolated economic losses and more about systemic unfairness.
Can you give us an example of that?
Like government officials' power abuse, school bully by kids from a local powerful family, and pension cut, unreasonable fees, or arbitrary enforcement. All these kind of
Social
problems,
injustice?
yeah,
Right.
of the systemic unfairness. I think people have always been aware of this systemic unfairness, but they could improve their own life even in an unfair system before, but not anymore now. They started to look at the problem of the system.
So you're saying that in the past, the protests, maybe they were more isolated and they are usually related to one's problem.
Yeah,
like
their
fighting for
own
one's right.
economic welfare, their own economic gains. Yeah.
But you're saying that in the past few years, we're seeing an increase of social unrests and on the ground of social injustice, social fairness, because people are looking into the root cause of their suffering.
Yeah, some scholar would say this is a kind of erosion of the social contract during the reform era. That is accepting political control in exchange for rising living standards.
Prosperity.
Yeah. And but I think the Chinese people may not be demanding democracy, but they are questioning whether the system still works for them.
Right. Because what you're saying is if I can still put food on the table, I could still afford a house, I could still have a good job, and my children can have good jobs, then I'm probably willing to put up with a lot. But if I don't even have that prosperity, then what is this deal you're making me? You're forcing on me, right?
Yeah, I think for last 30 years, Chinese people feel their life is getting better and better. Yeah. But now they don't have this kind of feeling anymore.
Yeah, so this is the social indicator, and I think this part is the most important part, most interesting part of the report. I really recommend that people get into it. And there's also this section of finance. So, about the financial indicators, which ones stand out to you?
Well, I think several stand out clearly. China now displays classic sign of a liquidity trap.
What is that?
Liquidity trap means people won't borrow from the banks, even the interest rate
Are low.
is low, even to zero, even to negative. People still would not borrow. That is liquidity trap. That is, if the financial authority would like to loosen the liquidity, it won't work. That is so-called liquidity trap.
So much money in the banks, nobody wants to borrow.
Yeah,
What's wrong with that?
because the consumers and the private firms, they don't have confidence for the future. So they won't spend, they won't invest. They just save money in the bank. And the bank would buy government bond rather than lend money to the business. So the real economy won't be active because there is no blood get into the whole body of the economy.
Right. So we're seeing an economy in stagnation.
Yeah, but because China's financial system is tightening control by the government, so we won't see a sudden collapse of the financial system. On the surface, I think it looks very calm and stable. But underneath, I think it shows a very defensive system. Yeah, it just want to maintain stability.
Play safe.
Yeah.
So I've also heard other people talk about the debt problem in China. How bad is it?
There are several different kind of measurement because I think for the official data for the Chinese government, the debt is about 60 to 70% of the GDP, which is okay. But if you add up the hidden debt from the local government, especially the so-called local government financial vehicles, it will be around 100 to 120% of GDP.
That still doesn't sound so bad compared to other countries.
It sounds like US and Japan.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Chinese government's revenue is very low. Nowadays, they just rely upon deficits, budget deficits, to keep the government operate. So in the future, the deficit just increase sharply, and whether they could have the money to return this debt, that will be a problem for the government. And the even more serious problem is all those hidden debt of these so-called zombie firms. Yeah, state-owned enterprises and the private firms, because the whole system is very spacious. So the government just, they don't want to then go bankrupt. If you are in a real market economy, they definitely already go bankrupt. But in China, they just stay there like a zombie.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's really a problem.
Yeah, it's like taking time bomb. So these are the financial indicators that. So I really also suggest that you take a look into it. And I think a question I would also like to ask you. So we are in Taiwan. Why is it so important for us, the experts, the researchers in Taiwan, to monitor the developments in China systematically?
I think because Taiwan faces China not as an abstract case study. China for Taiwan actually is a daily strategical reality. If we overestimate China's strengths, we panic. If we underestimate China's strengths, we will be complacent. I think both ways are very dangerous. I think Taiwan should avoid reactive policy making toward China. Systematic monitoring helps Taiwan avoid reactive policy making.
What would be an example of reactionary policymaking?
For example, if we don't have a very comprehensive view about where China is directing to, we just respond to what China did to Taiwan. That is what I call reactive policy making. I think we should have a more comprehensive view of China, and we can have more initiative, even creative China policy. So we just take the initiative rather than be responsive.
Right, yeah.
This is important for Taiwan, I think.
Yeah. And a very interesting question to ask you, and it has to do with an upcoming meeting that's going to take place later in March. So we know that Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Trump are going to meet, I think, either late March or early April. So, based on these indicators, what do they suggest about China's international and regional outlook? So, for example, how might Xi Jinping approach relations with the US?
I think according to our indicator, they suggest the Chinese leadership that fears pressure, but is not backing down.
Why not?
Because I think China, although they have a lot of problem domestically, but Xi Jinping would put priority on superpower competition. So they still concentrate resources on control, technological self-reliance, and the geopolitical competition. But the weak demand at home make exports even more important for China. So I think in the future, the relation with US, I think it will be tense, but negotiable. Even without Donald Trump, I think that will be the nature of the US-China relations.
Right. So you're saying that in terms of international relations, China will remain assertive, but not overly combative.
Yeah.
Right. But the economic policies will, still rely heavily on exports. How about domestic consumption? Are they going to do anything to stimulate domestic consumption?
Not from our observation. I think for last several years, many economists, no matter they are Chinese or international economists, they all suggest China to have their limited physical resources, put their resources on stimulating domestic consumption. That means the Chinese government probably need a very dramatic action to have some kind of income redistribution within China through the provision of social welfare. But the Xi Jinping government would rather to put the limited physical resources on superpower competition.
Right.
So we still see he will put resources on military build-up and technological development. Yeah, so that's the problem. I think if he keep doing so, I think it's very hard for the domestic demand to go up.
Yeah, so I could see the domestic consumption does not seem to be the priority right now. Right. So my last question is probably the most difficult to answer. So this is the end of the program, and we have gone through the indicators, what these means for China. But the question I would like to ask you is, so given these trends, social, economic, and political, what should Taiwan do next?
I would say three things. First is keep investing in knowledge about China. Monitoring China isn't optional, it's necessary. And the second is strengthen economic and social resilience at home, because a confident Taiwan is harder to be pressured.
So, Ms. Tao, you mentioned social and economic resilience. Can you please elaborate on that, what that means?
I think nowadays people in Taiwan are very anxious for many different things. For example, the possibility of China's invasion. And in Taiwan, we are so familiar with natural disasters like
Earthquakes and typhoons?
earthquake and the typhoon. Yeah. So I think there are a lot of things people in Taiwan have to worry about. So for last several hundred years, I think we get used to it. So I think people in Taiwan actually by nature are very resilient. And how could we turn this kind of individual resilience into a real societal resilience and economic resilience? I think that's the job the government should put focus on. For example, we have a lot of experience of how to deal with the disaster caused by typhoon. And when we talk about the whole society resilience, probably we need more cooperation and communication between government and society to form a partnership from bottom up rather than top down. And I think that kind of resilience will be more sustainable, and it's also good for our social solidarity.
Right. It sounds like it requires the authorities to be more communicative with all sides of the society.
Exactly.
Right.
And the third thing is to work with partners. Taiwan's insights on China are valuable internationally. Sharing them helps shape a more realistic global understanding. Yeah, I think China will not be collapsed in near future, but China is not cruising either. Challenge for Taiwan is to stay clear-eyed, calm, and prepared.
Right. So you're saying that we should neither overestimate nor underestimate China.
Yeah,
So I think
just closely watch
right
and
these
prepared.
indicators is I think it's a very useful window into the long-term trends that are developing in China. And this is year one, and we look forward to seeing future studies on this. And we thank you, Ms. Tao, for coming onto the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And so every time we talk about China, it's always a humbling experience because I know so little, but there's so much to learn. So, well, I also would like to thank the audience for tuning into the program. And thank you for listening to Taiwanology. Our next episode will be online March 24th. Stay tuned with CommonWealth Magazine's reporting on Taiwan and China. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.